Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. And today I've got longtime friend and fellow physical therapy owner, Bart McDonald, owner of Superior Physical Therapy and Diagnostics in Idaho. Bart, thanks for joining us today.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This is a fun platform to be able to discuss good business things here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining me. I've known you for quite some time. Why don't you go ahead and share with the audience a little bit about where you're coming from as a PT owner, what you've been doing, and what got you to this point in your life?
Oh, you bet. I grew up in Idaho, ended up going to undergrad at Brigham Young University, and then bounced from there out to Emory University in Atlanta. And I just was really bent on a goal that I had to own my own physical therapy practice. This is why I went into physical therapy. I was very excited about it. Kind of realized within one semester at a private university that I was going to have more debt than I had first projected. That was kind of a tough realization. I don't know if anybody coming in listening today has had that same realization, but I even remember, Nathan, going in and talking to the department head one semester in and just saying, hey, Dr. Catlin, I'm going to be upside down. But, financially, when I get out of school, I'm going to have almost 3 times debt to income ratio. And she kind of said, I don't know what to do for you. Like, that was it. She was super nice. Yeah. That's just kind of the facts, right? Facts of life.
No options, right?
Yeah. And so it was kind of scary. Got out of school, went back to Idaho, was in a hospital-based practice, and then kind of started a bunch of side moonlighting type of experiences to try to bring in money for the family, money to pay off debt, and was able to get into a private practice within about 4 years out of graduate school. Started a private practice on my own, recognizing that's what I wanted to do. Number one, that's where I was driven, kind of where your passion leads you. And then secondarily, I was never going to get out of debt unless I owned a business associated with the love that I had for physical therapy. And so, I couldn't just be a W-2 employee and be able to get out of debt from where I was. And so started that practice. And then it's from the end of 2004 until now, we're opening our 5th location here in Southeastern Idaho. Yeah. So it's been a wonderful ride and a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Well, congratulations. You've made some great strides there in your professional and ownership journey. Along the way, you alluded to some of the issues that you had in terms of taking on debt to get through physical therapy school. And thus, I know it's kind of been within you for some time to write a book or at least address the issue of debt related to current physical therapy students. And thus you've become a recent author. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I wrote a book just recently called Debt Free PT. And, this project came to mind. It's been on my mind because this is the journey that I went through personally in my business and physical therapy career. Had over 6 figures in debt myself and came out making like $38,000, $39,000 a year, and you're going, right. Oh, wow, that's terrible in that ratio. And that also for anybody out there that's younger than us, Nathan, they're going to go, oh my goodness, that's what they used to pay. That is what they used to pay. And wages have gone up a little bit, but so has the debt, right? And so probably just a couple of years ago, I had one of my associates, a really smart PT, loved sports. One of his goals was, hey, I'm going to get board certified in sports. I'm going to, anyway, and had been in his undergrad, had been a collegiate athlete. And so we loved working with our sports injuries and was inside of our Gold's Gym clinic. So just to kind of describe this, it's really a 3,000 square foot clinic that is connected to a Gold's Gym. So you've got your pool, you've got all of your strengthening equipment, you've got all your dynamic, more functional sports related rehab equipment at your fingertips. You can do anything in there. It's amazing, especially for Idaho. I think there's probably some people are like, oh yeah, you find those sports centers for rehab everywhere. Not necessarily in Idaho. This really is like the physical therapist dream for sports, really. He was in that clinic. And we would always talk about which ACL he was rehabbing and which athlete and if they were getting better and stuff. And then one day I am looking at my email and I get something just pops up, and it's an email from him with his resignation. And granted, like, this just blew me away because I thought this was my most satisfied employee and PT associate in our practice right now. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been missing the boat here. What have I been missing? So I dropped what I was doing. We rearranged some things on his schedule so we could sit down and meet. And he just said, Bart, it's the craziest thing, but I am so stuck financially. This is my dream job, and yet I can't stay. And I mean, seriously, looking at him, I almost got teary-eyed because I'm like, what do you mean you can't stay? This is your dream. You're there. You're right. You know. And he just said, look, I'm way over 200,000 in debt. I'm married. I've got a couple of kids. I can't buy a house. I can't fix my car. I'm struggling to have enough to pay my groceries, this huge student loan debt payment that's due every month. And I don't know what to do about it. And so I've got a job offer in geriatrics. And so I'm going to have to drop my dream job to take something that I never thought I'd ever do. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, Nathan, I think for those physical therapists that join our profession that love geriatrics, I mean, number one, totally a critical aspect of physical therapy practice. But I'm just of the opinion that whatever is your passion, you got to follow that dream and you got to find a way to make it happen. But when I started researching a little bit more on student debt, I just realized that I'd been kind of missing the impact of what's going on in our profession right here, right now, because the debt load is so heavy. It took me to months of research, and I started researching out what is the current situation for our new grads. What are they entering in? And this didn't get a lot of press because of COVID, but in 2020, the APTA released what they called an impact study for student loans for debt, and basically came out with a few stats that were quite alarming. First and foremost, it was that majority of all of our new grads have over $150,000 of student loans. And I think it was 156 is what they reported. So it's just, you know, so you've got some in those private universities that are way over 200, like my friend. And then some that may have found cheaper ways to get through school, sure. But the average being over 150 was quite alarming. And then the study was even a little bit better. They took a step further and they said, okay, so how does this impact the physical therapist's life? And over 60% were saying, I can't buy a house. I can't buy a car. And then they listed off these percentages. Great study. And I can't get married. I'm putting off having children. Like, I can't have a family. All the way to including what my friend's problem was, which was I can't actually practice in the type of physical therapy setting which I'd love to practice in. And as I got thinking about this, I said, boy, that's really a shame. I mean, our debt to income ratio, another thing that they compared was other medical professions and allied health professions, and really we are one of the worst for debt to income ratio. It's really high. So in looking at all that, I thought, man, this is terrible, this burden of debt, but it really mirrors what I went through with me and my family, because I did go to a private university, and I did have over 100,000 with a much lower income at that time. The ratios are kind of similar. And so I just started writing. One night I remember I came home and I was just so frustrated to see people struggling to be able to not pursue their passion within the physical therapy career. And so I just started kind of just making notes. And then from there, whenever I would start driving, I would just start talking into my phone. I don't know if you've ever done this, but just kind of just brainstorming, almost just like this mind meld vomit with your phone where you're just dumping stuff. And it's just ideas and ideas. And I started sifting through these ideas and realized that the path that I took is really similar to what each one of these individuals face. And they might be a lot worse off in so many ways.
Mhm.
But then I actually started to even think about, okay, what are the solutions to this problem? And outside of the APTA's impact study, so just as an aside, we should look at also, just talk briefly about what the APTA suggested we do about it. And the APTA is a phenomenal body and organization. I mean, really what they've been doing and the transformation that the APTA has made in our career to kind of be a reactive body or organization to be such a proactive, both on Capitol Hill and otherwise. I mean, I can't say enough about our organization. They're phenomenal. But all of the struggles that are up against us as a profession with this debt, you could tell by the suggestions that they were making that they don't have a lot of control on this. In fact, almost none. Mm-hmm. The market and the business side of education is really driving the outcome that we're seeing for our new graduates. So they came up with ideas like, hey, we should brainstorm what it might be like to kind of restructure that DPT degree. But we don't really have any idea what that looks like. I mean, we're going to have to get together with educators and come up with some solutions, but we don't know. We need to get that national health passed. We've been trying to get scholarships for underprivileged, for some of our, we've been talking a lot about diversity in the APTA and the lack of it for the last year plus. And I think the APTA is making some strides there. But what are we going to do when the answer from some of our minorities would be, hey, I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I didn't have all of the opportunities that might have been given to other people that are readily joining the workforce in physical therapy. How can I be successful in this? And we need to be able to answer that question. And they brought up as solutions kind of a lot more questions than answers. But I almost feel like that's what the APTA should do. It's really not the APTA's burden to be able to solve all of our problems. That's why we have smart people all the way through our profession that just need to put our heads together. And then the APTA, in my opinion, is kind of the springboard to organize and make that effort a reality. And that's what I really expect for them, and that's what I expect from our profession.
So the book that you wrote, it's geared towards physical therapists, right? To help the physical therapy student or even the new grad to overcome any debt-related issues that they have. I think the important thing about your book is, for my audience here on the Physical Therapy Owners Club, is that owners recognize what they're having to deal with, right? And that can impact so many things. And I don't think you're here saying, hey, we've got to up our salaries or anything like that. But I think the importance now, where we're currently standing, is simply make owners aware of what they're coming out, of what these new grads are coming out with, what the average number looks like. Not that it should necessarily affect the average rate or reimbursement rate, or I'm sorry, salary for a new grad, because our reimbursements are relatively staying the same, but recognize what they're having to deal with and what can you do to help alleviate the issue, right? Are there some programs that you can put in place? Are there bonuses that you can put in place related to productivity? Or can you be a little bit more understanding to the fact that they're going to want to moonlight? Or, they might have to actually, or could you provide them moonlighting opportunities yourselves to gain some extra cash? I think the important thing right now is, number one, make them aware, right?
Absolutely. And I think I just came back a couple weekends. You were at this same symposium. We had a bunch of owners together, and it was when we kind of discussed some of the impact study from the APTA as a group, there was a lot of shocked people in that as owners of what that really looks like for these new grads. And there are some really good strategies. And as I came and decided I was going to put a book together, there's really kind of two objectives. Number one, I need to write a book from my standpoint, having kind of walked their path, recognizing that I was in a similar debt to income ratio and was able to get out of debt within 6 years, which was miraculous, really. But went back through and kind of created a step-by-step of how I was able to do that. And I really shouldn't say me, my wife and I really, I mean, we had it as a very team approach. Um, and we put together a chapter followed by a home exercise program for that new graduate. What you can do now from the, let's analyze your debt. Step one, analyze the debt. Let's look at what this debt looks like. Let's see how the interest is impacting you, short-term, long-term, and create really a strategy for debt elimination. And then after walking through each of these chapters at the beginning, which is, for me as a new graduate, these would have been very revolutionary ideas. I'd never encountered debt like this. The most debt I had ever had prior to this was $100 on a credit card, right? I mean, I was debt free coming out of undergraduate, and then maybe had a debt on a car for $2,000, right? The beater that was getting us from point A to point B. So we get through that, and then the back side of the book can really be taken on, just like you said, ideas in more of a proactive way, so that PT cannot just be at the mercy of the interest rate, but how can I moonlight? What are the steps I need to do to talk with my current employer? How do I not lose my skill set? If I'm going into outpatient physical therapy and maybe I have a love in sports, or maybe I've got a love in just general orthopedics, whatever that looks like, spine, how do I not lose my skill set by moonlighting or going into some other aspect to make some more money? And then it even breaks down really within physical therapy, the most profitable aspects today of our profession. And honestly, it's not always outpatient physical therapy, right? We've got a lot more lucrative things, sometimes in home health, sometimes in skilled nursing. And if you want to do geriatrics, you've gone the right way as far as the money side of it as well. And so in that second portion of it, it's all breaking down the facts and then helping them create, much like you would a business plan, a 1 to 5 year plan, and even 10-year plan for their own career. It's really a career and business plan for themselves, whether they own a practice or not.
If you're going to talk to owners about this, I think one of the first things that they might want to do is, number one, read the book, and maybe have a few copies on hand for their other physical therapists as they're working with them, so that they can give them some of these tools. Because, financial literacy is lacking in all of our educations. And so providing them this kind of support, I think, would be a huge help.
Well, it was interesting. Most of the owners in that symposium in Texas, where we kind of unveiled the book there, the biggest buyers were owners, and they were buying 10, 15 copies for all their therapists, some for their PTAs as well. And when I was talking to the owners, I said, well, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to this topic? And there was two. One was this common idea where they couldn't recruit and retain because debt was driving the decision for many people in our field. And then two, they kind of had this uncomfortable feeling like there's times where people that they hired as the owner, like it was almost their responsibility to help dig them out of debt, rather than a personal responsibility where it's my student loans. So maybe as an employee, I'm really coming to you, Nathan, as the owner of the practice, and saying, oh, I've got $200,000 in debt. Nathan, you got to help me dig this out. First and foremost, I know I've only worked for you for 90 days, but I need a $10,000 raise. And I've heard that. I mean, that's not a surprising request, as if reimbursement is going up and money grows on trees, right? So there's just a lack of understanding. As an owner, I don't know if you've come into across this, but when I've had a conversation like that, I am so surprised then, and almost kind of upset. And it's a lack of understanding on my part, and a lack of understanding on the PT's part, right? So we want to get beyond that.
Right. So I think having the awareness, recognizing the state of physical therapists coming out of school nowadays, and what they're dealing with in terms of debt load. It starts there, but then what do you recommend past that? I mean, what can owners do to speak to these new grads, speak to the people that have a lot of debt load, What would you say to them outside of, okay, read the book, help them out? Then what are some of the things either you do or some of the things that you might recommend on a general scale?
Yeah, one of the chapters that we do address is that moonlighting, and I think the name of the chapter is like sacrificing more, and again, really owning that debt, because I think that there is a misunderstanding or a hope in that might be misled in a lot of these new grads that hey, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to have a government leader that's just going to forgive $200,000 in debt. And while we're looking at an interesting financial status or in our history as America, I don't know that any business owner or any individual should bank $200,000 of debt forgiveness on their future. Like that's a tough way to go.
Right.
But yet that's really pretty prevalent. And so with coming to moonlighting as a suggestion and really embracing that type of an idea, what it needs to happen in order to sacrifice, there's also some other things in the kind of the third section of the book that is really more based towards owners, but also that the new grad can really glean from. There are other ways for PT owners to make better reimbursement, and that's what is also addressed. So, for instance, in our practice, we've done musculoskeletal ultrasound and EMG for the last 6 years. And it just makes more per hour than anything else I get reimbursed at for physical therapy. It also saves patients tons of money in MRI costs, as well as what I would term to be unnecessary surgery. So we're saving the system money. As business owners in physical therapy, it should at least attract our attention because the reimbursements are better. At a time when all we're talking about is decreased reimbursements, I can't find any other aspect of physical therapy that is such a dramatic win-win, patient and practice. And so what we did in this, Nathan, we started just a couple of years ago. We decided that we wanted to get the training that was necessary within musculoskeletal ultrasound and EMG, that we were going to go all in, and we were going to, especially for ultrasound, we were going to ask and then require all of our therapists to engage in this process. And as we saw more and more therapists start down the learning path, we realized that they were having to spend a little more time in the evenings studying. This was not it's not a road if you got done with PT school and decided you were never going to pick up a book or a journal again. That's not the right road for you if that's your expectation. So, but for those that are willing to study and work hard, we figured out that we could give a significant percentage of the profits from this back to the therapist, and then leverage what the government has been doing in the CARES Act to give us the ability to pay essentially direct into that student loan account. And save them by having about 5,000 plus of that first segment of our loan reimbursement each year comes out pre-tax. So our system that we set up, and I think not everybody's fits the same, right? But for ultrasound, we decided, hey, we want that diagnostic ultrasound piece for our patients. We recognize that the research shows that it changes our plan of care as a physical therapist for the better over 62% of the time when we use it. So it's in the patient's benefit, and it's so much cheaper than any other imaging that's out there to be able to guide the PT plan of care or medical plan of care for musculoskeletal injuries. And then secondarily, if we can invest back in the therapist, then we're going to pay as much as $10,000 a year in student loan repayment per therapist.
Right.
And that is a bit of a game changer. When we looked at the APTA's impact study on that, it really showed that only 8% of all any employer within physical therapy are engaging in any amount of student loan repayment, and that the average student loan repayment within the ones that were participating, within the 8%, was about $18,000 total. So we're talking $10,000 a year, 5-year contract, plus what the cost savings is in that pre-tax dollars. We're estimating that we can get somewhere close to about $60,000 in loan repayment over a 5-year contract.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah. what it can do for your recruiting. I mean, when you're looking at, if a student or a new grad is looking at a place where they can work and they know that this person is going to help me with one of my major problems coming out of school. One of those is like, I want to improve my skill set. The second is I've got this huge debt load on top of me. If you can speak to that in your ads and your recruiting, it definitely helps you connect with those people a lot more. Have you recognized that yourself?
Yeah, that's been a tremendous benefit to us. And we also recognize that it kind of weeds out some of those folks that are really not interested in learning beyond graduate school.
Okay.
We're honest about it. There's a learning curve, just like anything else in physical therapy. If I was going to sit for my OCS or SCS, I mean, I've got to study. If I'm going to sit for my ECS and become a board certified clinical electrophysiologist, or I'm going to become a fellowship trained in musculoskeletal ultrasound, we're all kind of talking the same type of commitment. And because that we're marrying a problem, the problem being debt in the student, with a problem that we have, which is recruiting and retention, and being able to do it on that commonality. I don't think you come across too many physical therapists that don't want to learn and that don't just love to learn. And so that being the solution between the debt and the growth needed in consistent staff for the PT owner, it's the match made in heaven for recruiting.
When you talk about some of the things that an owner can do, you've set up a bonus plan of some kind that can be tied directly to their student loan debt. I'm assuming there are other things that could be done, and maybe you highlight these in your book, could be sign-on bonuses, of course, especially if they're going to move from one state to another, something like that, some expense repaid, or simply sign-on bonuses to begin with. But also, well, have you thought about, or even use it yourself, maybe putting them on 410s? So maybe they have a 3-day weekend to moonlight and spend more time. Is that something that you've also considered?
Yeah, in fact, we just made that change about 18 months ago. And honestly, as an owner, I was really, I've always kind of not really enjoyed the idea of 410s, because I really want each therapist to be totally engaged in their caseload and not be distracted. But I had our board of directors, which is really mostly made of clinical directors, that came to me and said, hey, you're talking the talk about loan repayment, moonlighting, but you're not walking the walk when it comes to enabling these guys to actually have the time to be attractive to other agencies, home health and whatever, skilled nursing, that would like to do it. So now what you've seen in the past, and I had to kind of do a little bit of self-recognition, because I realized that some of these guys that are leaving our practice to go and take on something that make more money in geriatrics, I had not done all I could do. And 410s has been something that's been helpful. Other ones, we're shifting it around, and we're basically trying to create a caseload based on their full scope. So we usually sit down, and we try to sit down with our PT associates in our practice on a quarterly basis. And those that want to be open enough to talk about their 1, 2, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, that's what we're really trying to do with each one of them. And then if they really are wanting to be transparent on their debt, then we're helping them track their debt. Not as if it's my responsibility, but then I go, hey, look, I did create for one of your other coworkers an introduction to a home health company that's really, really good, that'll work around your schedule. They like a 410 scenario. Which day of the week? They're looking for Tuesdays to be their PT day, but they want 8 to 10 hours. Are you willing to do it? This is what they're willing to pay. So I'm setting up moonlighting for them, and trying to change some of the priorities of the way we cover our caseloads to actually facilitate and make it happen. And honestly, 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have done this, Nathan. I really needed to make some changes in my own mind.
Well, it was the result of switching over to that 410 schedule. Has it been relatively win-win for both sides? You know, an extra day for them and similar, if not better, productivity for you?
It's been similar productivity. And one of the things that I think that's been really helpful on that is that we work all of our PTs in a PT-PTA team.
Mhm.
And so the day that the PT is off, the PTA is in, and then vice versa. So normally they're working side by side for 3 10s, and then that fourth 10-hour day, they have some separate time away from their team member, but it's worked out really, really well. And of course, you got to look at your supervision rules and your individual state and kind of see how that works. But that's something that's been really, really productive in our physical therapy practice within those teams.
Well, to come back around, were you able to retain the therapist that wanted to take off after all?
Well, I'll tell you, the one I was not structured at the time for my good friend that bailed. I've actually had several attempts at a conversation with him, like, "Hey, you can come back. We're ready now." That's tough because we kind of had our chance. And so we have to recognize that each one of us in private practice, like, this is just a journey. And sometimes we kick ourselves and say, "Oh, that was a huge mistake." But I don't think we can look at the learning experience that we have as owners. I don't want to be too narrow-minded and say we don't ever make mistakes. But our mistakes are just part of the journey. And so as long as we're learning from them, right? And so we prioritized a more flexible schedule. We prioritized what moonlighting can mean for them, and how to have important, critical financial conversations. And we usually have it with their spouse and take them out to dinner and really make their family finance. Not that we come with it and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to fix this for you." Don't get me wrong, but them kind of bearing their financial soul and talking about together. We just tell them, "Hey, we want to just help you by a level of accountability that most employers are unwilling to do. We don't have a money tree. We're not going to bail you out. There are no bailouts, but we will try to facilitate and help." And we're totally committed.
That's great. And I think the more that you can show that you are aligned with their issues and concerns and purposes in their lives, the greater potential you have to retain them and work together to create a powerful relationship.
I really think that a few years ago, I used to hear from new grads, "What do you want coming out of school?" And number one was always mentorship, followed by competitive salary. How to become debt-free is now number one. And hopefully for owners out there, we've put in the time and effort and in writing this book. I hope that you can get really in it. We wanted to make a book that was inexpensive, because the last thing that a new grad needs is another $200 book, right? We all spent hundreds of dollars on our books every semester. So our goal was to keep it right at or under $20 and be able to give somebody a quick read at something that they can put into practice. And if they just follow the home exercise program at the end of each chapter, they're going to be successful with it.
That's awesome. And so if people wanted, especially if owners wanted to find multiple copies of this book, where would they do?
So you just go to our website. It's www.debt-freept.com. And so debt-freept.com, little hyphen in there. One of the other websites, I just wanted debt-freept.com. It was already taken by somebody that was some kind of a financial, will restructure your debt. But wanted to make it easy. Anyway, debt-freept.com with a dash in between debt and free. And you can just order as many ones that just be delivered to your practice.
Well, anything else you want to share that maybe we haven't covered here that you think is vitally important for owners to understand or do in light of this issue that their new grads are coming out with?
I guess real kind of light bulb that went off along this process for owners, or personally as a practice owner, is I really recognize that drive that each of us have had to be an entrepreneur, to make the best practice possible, to make a difference one patient at a time with anybody and everybody coming through our door, to really make a product that people would seek after and that would change lives. Like, that's who we are in our practice. And frankly, every time I talk to somebody with passion in private practice, physical therapy, it's almost the same phrases just come tumbling out, or something like that. Those core values and everything that we stand for are real. The struggle is that what is going to happen in the next generation when the student debt has crushed the entrepreneurial spirit.
Mhm.
There won't be that opportunity. I jumped in and I having a 3-to-1 debt to income ratio, like, was pretty miraculous that I got into a private practice. It came through a lot of hard work and a lot of moonlighting, and there's probably a few owners that say, I don't know if my associates are willing to work that hard, but there are those out there that are. And the struggle is if the debt barrier is just so high that their dreams can never be accomplished, whether they're doing it with you as a part of a kind of a ownership expansion or even on their own. And so you kind of look at physical therapy in general. When we look at who's our champions, who's the champions within our profession? Well, look around in the APTA, looking around in private practice. We have these long-term, just stalwart heroes in my mind. And really, what's going on Capitol Hill, trying to fight decreased in reimbursements, really that's coming off the backs of private practice and has for years. Now, we have some very stalwart, serviceable, intelligent, driven educators as well that are totally engaged in the PT world. But when we think about just sheer numbers and the finances that drive the protection of our profession, it's private practice. So if all of a sudden there's no entrepreneurs in our blood anymore because the barriers are just too high, I fear that what we have enjoyed and kind of our love of the game might not be there in the next generation because the barriers with debt are just too high. So I think really that's my last kind of message to owners is if you really want to live a legacy or leave a legacy to the next generation, it's time to take the student debt seriously. Not that you have any anymore, but every single one of the PTs that you work with, they do.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's not necessarily going to get better. I mean, the costs for the education have outpaced inflation 2-3 times over the last decade or two. So I don't know if it's going to get necessarily significantly better. We have to do what we can on our end to help that.
Yeah, no, it's a great take home message. And I would look to see that the APTA is going to make some wonderful strides there, but they're not going to do it without us. We as owners, we've got to do all we can do.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you and maybe talk to you about it and what you're doing, get your insight, how do they reach you, Bart?
Yeah, so you can shoot me an email anytime. It's Bart M as in McDonald. So bartmpt@gmail.com. And yeah, shoot me an email, pick up one of our books. They're cheap. Take a look at it, guys. It's a great financial solution and probably the best ROI that, in my opinion, that any of our new grads can pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. It's a huge help. And I'm so glad that you formulated a book around that to really address it, because I don't know if there are any other books out there like this right now that share this kind of wisdom and the statistics that you brought up today. But thank you for doing so. Thank you for shedding the light on that.
You bet. It was a journey and definitely something that I hope from just a personal basis, a great way to give back to our profession.
Right. Well, thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast as well.
You bet. Thanks for inviting me, Nathan. This has been great.
All right. Talk to you later, Bart.
All right. See ya.